kudos to everybody because as when you get when we're into this rate, we're approaching. When I first got in the business, rates had been in the nines and they had just started to get into the eights, and then they got into the mid sevens, and then they started to shoot back up, and that was in the first 2.5 years. When I say shoot back up, the highest they got was 8.5, and this was like 99 and 2000. So I very fortunate to get in the business when I did. And whenever I talked to those people that were doing mortgages when the rates were in the teens, I always like, God, what was that like? And so it was slow is what it was like, is the answer. And, the people that everybody that you ever talked to that was in an environment like that will all tell you the same thing. Is like going, yeah, you had to hustle. And one of the keys, there was a lot of takeaways from this event this week, and I haven't had a chance to really collate all of it. And I'm going to try to share some of my notes with Giuseppe so that we can bring you better information or more concise versions of the information. There's going to be some, so they do these breakout sessions where people volunteer to share some of the things that they're doing. And then you can sign up to go to different breakout sessions. There's usually 3 or 4 of them at a time. And there were 3, I think altogether there was about a dozen breakout sessions that, I don't know if it was that many, maybe 9 breakout sessions that they're just people sharing different things that they're doing related to how they're getting business, how they're attracting real estate agents right now, different ways to present the information that we've all been presenting. And so I'll have some really good ones to share with you, some great takeaways on the point of sale conversation to get the client to commit to using you, to find out for sure if they're going to commit to using you or not. Some great scripting around that stuff that I'll share with you guys next week, or sooner if I can get it done. But one of the things that I want to, and I'll share. So I have it was sent to us in a WhatsApp thread. So I just got to make sure I can find it and send it to you. There's a 1-hour podcast that was shared while we were there on this subject of what's going on with buyer's agents. And if you're not aware, there's class action lawsuits have been filed in different parts of the country where, and the lawsuit centers around the idea that sellers have forever have been forced to pay a buyer's agent commission as part of the listing contract that they signed. And they were never presented with an opportunity to not pay the buyer's agent commission. It was always just the way it was always been presented is like, here's how this works. I'm going to list your house, and Lori will pipe in here, I'm sure, but I'm going to list your house for 5% or 6%. And this is how much the buyer's agent's going to get. And that system has worked. I don't know if it's worked. I think it's worked pretty well over all over these years because, a buyer's agent getting the commission incents the buyer to show your house to a buyer that they're working with. Right. And so the class action lawsuit is the sellers have been forced to do this, and they weren't presented with an option to not do it. And so it violates the Sherman Antitrust Act, and class action lawsuit attorneys are going to make a fortune on this, but the sellers are going to get $500, right? The sellers that were supposedly harmed, that they signed up. So you know how class action lawsuits work, right? You see the advertisements on TV that if you worked in the military at Camp Lejeune and anybody who would so call us because we'll sign you up, right? Well, the lawsuit, the way it works is they go and settle, they get a big lawsuit settlement, and the more, and you get $500 is what you get. You don't get hundreds of thousands of dollars. You don't get millions of dollars. The class action attorneys do, because they typically get 25 or 30%. And what's interesting about this is that this is happening, and it's already, real estate companies are already settling these lawsuits because in a million years, I would have thought that's not going to work. The seller knows what they're doing. The seller signs the agreement and they know that there's a buyer's agent. They see the buyer's agent at the closing. It's not like they didn't know that somebody was getting paid. But the way it was presented, it was presented in a way in this lawsuit that I'd never, in this podcast that I'll share with you, it was presented in a way that I'd never heard it presented before. And it goes like this. The seller agrees to pay a commission to a buyer's agent that's being hired to negotiate against the seller. Like, oh shit, that's weird. That's kind of a weird thought, isn't it? Like, it never occurred to me that that's actually what's going on, because the buyer's agent's getting paid from the sellers, comes out of the seller's sales price, and they actually negotiate against the seller to get a better deal. They negotiate with the listing agent to try to get the price as low as they can, and the seller wants as much as they can. So it's kind of weird when you think about it. It's like, I never thought about it like that. In all the years of doing this, I never thought about it in those terms. So these three guys that are real estate guys are on a podcast, and they're just discussing what's going on, and then their opinions about where this is going to head, where this is headed. And nobody knows for sure how it's going to shake out. But the key takeaway and the discussion that we had, and it wasn't like we solved anything. I think there's going to be we're going to have some calls that I'll be able to share with you, like I have in the past. Some of these calls that are pretty good that we do, I can share them with you. Is a discussion on masterminding or brainstorming ways that we can take advantage of this situation. Because if buyer's agents aren't going to have buyer leads to give you anymore, and 70 or 80% of your business comes from buyer's agents, where are we going to get our leads? Right. And so that's the big question. And so, people are still going to buy houses. It's not like people aren't going to buy houses. So it's about an hour long. I haven't been able to listen to the whole thing. I've only listened to half of it. It's about an hour long podcast, and I don't have any answers yet. I will say that but I think Rich and I discussed this a lot. Rich is the guy that I rode to Park City with, who has been in the business for 25 years. We had a lot of really good discussions on this subject. And I think there is an opportunity. I'm not sure what it is yet. I think there is an opportunity. So one of the things that was thrown out there is, maybe as mortgage companies, we're going to hire paralegals to work for us to help buyers write contracts to make offers on houses. Because again, if there's no agent that's negotiating, if nobody's negotiating for you, if you're not going to hire, because if the seller's not going to pay the buyer's agent's commission, how's the buyer agent going to get paid? Right now, they'd have to pay out of pocket, or because mortgage companies, at least mortgage law today, doesn't allow us to finance a buyer's agency commission on top of the max loan to value loan they're doing. Right. So it's an interesting thought process. 3% of a $500,000 house is $15,000. So if a buyer's agent is, if a buyer wants to buy a house and use a buyer's agent, and he's scraping by to come up with his minimum down payment, how's he going to pay the buyer's agent? And so just some interesting thought processes here, and I'm not sure where it's headed. To be clear, the only people that are going to make a lot of money on this are the class action lawyers. Everybody else is not. So far, RE/MAX has settled. There's 2 or 3 companies that have already settled cases that have been brought against them. And I'm not seeing anything yet in our market. I don't know if you guys are as well, where this buyer's agency commission is being negotiated as part of a transaction, but it is something that we all need to be aware of. It's coming. Something's going to change. I'm not sure what that means yet. People are still going to buy houses. It's not like the housing market's going to go away. And these guys talk about how in some countries around the world, like Australia, doesn't use buyer's agents. Buyers negotiate directly with the listing agent, and that's how it works. But I don't know exactly how the process works and how mortgage people are involved. I mean, so it's really going to be interesting. It's an interesting phenomena, and I'm not sure how it goes. So I will share this podcast. I would listen to it over the weekend and just start thinking about, okay, so and I'm just going to pose this question. If you're not going to get leads from buyer's agents, where are you going to get your leads? Because people are still, the same number of people are going to buy. It's not like buying is going to stop. So where are we going to get our leads? How are we going to get them? And I think the biggest number one, doubling down, tripling down, quadrupling down on your relationships with the people that already know you is the first place, for sure. And then I'm not sure after that. I'm not sure what the other opportunities are. Obviously, other financial professionals that refer business to you. But at the end of the day, buyer's agents is where we get most of our leads today. And so that could be a big change in the system. So anyway, anybody have any feedback or anything they'd like to share? Anything that anybody else has heard about this? Go ahead, Lori.
I maybe remind everybody that there aren't specifically buyer's agents out there. every agent you're coming into contact with is a buyer and a seller's agent. So all your agents are still the same people. So when somebody comes to me and says, I want to buy a house, I'm still going to refer them to my lender to go get qualified, whether I'm going to get paid for it or not. So I feel like that kind of takes a little bit of the fear of, oh my God, where are we going to get our leads from? Nothing's changed. The agents are buyers and sellers agents at the same time. So
Yeah, but if you're a buyer, but if you don't have a house to sell right now, Lori, if you're a listing agent and you don't have a house to sell, and I call you like going, hey, I want to buy a house, what are you going to say as a buyer's agent? Like, what would you say now?
I don't know how that, I don't know how that's going to play out, but at the same time, I'm still going to say, well, go get it pre-approved if you're going to buy. And then I don't know how what's going to shake out. I don't know how that's going to work. This is very interesting, but there's no buyer's agents out there. They're all the same. So keep contacting your agents and keep getting the info, but it is going to be it's going to be weird.
Has anybody heard anything from their agents on this subject yet?
I haven't heard anything.
A little bit. I think everybody's just still trying to figure out what the market's going to do. They're talking about maybe doing concessions, instead to pay for the buyers rather than like a buyer's commission, right? That comes out of the, you're getting a concession, right? You're going above ask at the end of the day, stuff like that, just random weird shit.
These guys brought up some interesting things, like what's going to happen to the MLSs? Because the way the MLS really is working, the listing agent puts the house in the MLS. Why does he do that? So buyer's agents can see it and sign their customers up for searches. If they're not going to get paid to do that, what's going to happen to the MLSs? That's one of the questions. Like, what's going to happen to Zillow? They make money selling leads to buyer's agents. That's Zillow's business model, selling buyer leads. Who are they going to sell them to? Who are they going to sell those leads to? So that's going to be different. So it's just a lot of questions. I have no answers, but lots of questions. Go ahead, Dean.
It'll be interesting to see if this drives more people to new builds, because in new builds, they don't really negotiate a whole lot, and they've got money they're already paying realtors to bring people through the door. So I don't think it's going to affect their model quite as much. So
I wonder if the builders are going to go, yeah, we're no longer paying buyer's agents. Sorry, not happening.
Yeah, they could potentially do that too.
Because they do that every now and then now, or they'll cut the hell out of it. When it's a hot market, they're like, we only pay 1% to the buyer's agents.
Yeah.
That happens.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting discussion to have with builders. I may sort of brainstorm with you and put something together.
Yeah. So I will get the podcast to everyone so that you can listen to it. And just like I said, start thinking about it now, because change is coming. And then, you know what? This industry has always changed a lot. So this isn't like, oh no. And I'm not, it isn't going to change anything about how many people are buying homes. So it's just going to be the way they buy them is going to change. And so we're going to have to evolve. But that's fine. We've done that a million times. So
one of the things I sent out that recording.
Oh, good. Thank you.
And emailed it out to Zenith LO, but they said, the flip side of that is, if there's no motivation for buyer's agents to show their buyers the house, then there's going to be maybe less buyers looking at homes, right? So the seller's going to get less offers, less competition, maybe a lower price point. And then at the end of the day, all these people that wanted the lawsuit to not pay the buyer's agents are going to be, all these sellers are going to be frustrated that they're selling their house for less and would rather pay the buyer's agent and make more money on their sale. So counterpoint to that.
Do you think more people will just not have an agent represent them as a buyer then? Maybe that's possible?
I think you could see some companies or models like Redfin, where like they just pay the agent, maybe 1%, something like that out of pocket to help out with the contract instead of 3%, which we had a feeling that number was going to move down at some point in our careers, but it could work out to be something like that. They said that ones that are going to be, that have to do a big business change are like the big teams, where you have a major agent that's doing a lot of lead generation and then, feeding 10 buyers agents, where they're gonna have to split up the listing money somehow to pay these buyers agents probably a salary to show homes.
I mean, I guess I'd be worried that there'd be more people without representation on the buyer side, and then they would get more like taken advantage of and.
That was
not
one of
be
the things,
able-
that's one of the points that these guys made in the video is like, who's going to represent the buyer's interests? Because the listing agent, whenever you do the dual agency, and Lori, you can explain how that works. Just when you have a listing and a buyer shows up without a buyer's agent, how does the dual agency work?
You have to, if you're representing both sides have to hear all of the information. So if you have specific information about the seller, or last year this flooded in the basement or whatever, now that's information I have to give the buyer. So it puts the agent in a really bad spot, because anything you hear on both sides, you have to tell each other. It's a
And
nightmare.
is there a way for you to turn it into a transaction only representation?
Yeah, no. You can be just a transaction coordinator and just shuffle papers and don't talk to anybody. And then that's kind of what a transaction coordinator does. They just say, give me the info and I'll give it to her, and then I'll give her.
So it's like so a lawyer
Yeah.
could do it.
Yeah,
So it could be
but
done
it sounds like maybe if that happens, I think the buyers are gonna rely more on you guys lending to help them make sure that the contract, I'm thinking they're gonna give it to you guys, because you're used to reading purchase contracts.
Yeah, but we have to be careful because
So,
we
Yeah.
can't cross over
Now
into
you're a
the
lawyer,
practicing
right.
law, with the
Yeah,
practicing contract law part of this, because
right.
Yeah.
So that's what I see happening, is the lenders are gonna be like, let me see that contract and let me see if it's good for you. And then you're gonna get sued for saying, yes, it was, and it really wasn't, or whatever, so. That's
Yeah,
dicey.
it sounds like it'll feel like you're a buyer going onto a used car lot. Right? You have no knowledge on how to negotiate properly, at least most people don't. And then they're going up against this used car salesman who knows every trick in the book to help their sellers out.
So that's where I thought, are we going to have paralegals working here that can help them negotiate contracts? Like, they're not out showing homes. They're just going, okay, well, let's look at the data and maybe similar to what a buyer's agent does on the contract side for negotiating. But yeah, I wouldn't want to negotiate against some of these freaking listing agents. You're gonna get your ass handed to you.
Somebody will figure out how to use AI to do this.
Well, because they have to get into the houses at some point. How do you let just random people to code to your house?
Yeah. Yeah,
Or does
that's another
somebody-
thing. Like, so is the listing agent now going to have to show the house to every time a buyer wants to see it? Think about that.
They'll hire a shower.
Yeah.
Pay him a salary
And then who's going to pay for that?
out of the listing agent commission when they sell the house.
So, yeah. So it's like I said, big changes coming.
Yeah, yikes.
I think that this is like a marketing opportunity as well, like to get out in front of realtors or to like have the conversation with them and let them talk about it too. And then it could also be something to like a notice to buyers at some point, like what to look out for, like if you're thinking about not hiring a realtor, I don't know.
I now, while they can still get paid and have representation.
Yeah.
Let's go fourth quarter.
Well, it'll be interesting. So let's watch the video. We'll have more discussions. I'll have more stuff to share the rest of the week. And let's have an awesome rest of your day, guys. All right. Thanks, everyone.